Welcome back to the Life Legacy Podcast. And as always, we bring on phenomenal, well-rounded leaders who, in majority of areas of their life, they have excelled to levels that, most people can't really fathom. And today is nothing different. Today, I get to bring on a friend, a mentor, and as well, someone that I look up to in many ways. I've seen this man take care of his family. I've seen this man really inspire a lot of people. He's been on hundreds of podcasts and has reached levels of financial freedom that most people can't really dream of. And most important, I would say, is he's a very well-rounded family man that has inspired a lot of people and has done a lot of good for the world. And so today I'm honored to be able to bring on Dave Allred to the podcast.
Thanks, Jackson. Excited to be here. That was quite the intro. I feel like the standard's been set pretty high there, but I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I would love for our audience to really get to know who you are today. And as well, you've built, a level of life that is pretty inspiring. And so I just want them to understand who you are. And so what currently fires you up and, is getting you excited in life lately?
Right now, today, I would say, we just celebrated our 20th anniversary with my wife and our 4 kids. Had a chance to go out to Santorini, Greece. It was amazing. Definitely the best week and the best vacation I've ever had in my life. It was incredible to have our 4 kids there and to witness it. Did a vow renewal. We call it a marrying 2.0, and so like a full wedding set up.
No way.
My 10-year-old was our ring bearer, and it was just incredible having the kids there to witness that and be able to feel the love and the relationships we're able to create as a family. Really excited about that. Looking forward to the next 20. On top of that, building our real estate firm, Axie Partners. It's been exciting. We launched about 5 years ago. It's gone really well. We have about 500 investors right now. Goal is to get up to that $1 billion mark by 2030. Keep growing it from there. Become one of the premier, best-in-class investment firms in the country. And besides that, really, it's I'd say right now what I'm most excited about is the family. It's the kids. We got 4 kids, ages 11, 14, 17, and my oldest just turned 20 2 days ago, which is crazy that I've created an adult out in the real world, going off to college. And so just really trying to lean into those moments. I call them non-refundable moments that we have right now with the kids, and the amount of love and just the culture that we've been able to curate in our family is really beautiful. And so just leaning into those opportunities and trying to be present and balanced when you're juggling, business and ambition and growth and scaling at the same time with what's really important with your family and on the home front.
Yeah. How did you come up with the thought to do a vow renewal? That sounds so special to have your kids there for that.
Yeah, it was seriously, man, it was amazing. We rented a yacht and went to 6 different islands out there, just cruising around and just sharing with our kids what basically answering that question you asked me is what's working, how did you guys create this? And so being able to have those meaningful, deep conversations with the kids and not just saying it, but showing them at the same time was really special. But yeah, so I think that, looking forward, but now it's like, okay, how do we replicate that, and not just replicate it, but how do we build upon that to make it even that much more beautiful in the future, right? And that's always been interesting because, you set a vision board, you set all your goals, and, once it says humbly, but once you hit those, then it's okay, well, what's next? And it's like vision board number 2, right? And number 3. And, but, and I guess it's very humbly, but what we've been able to build is like better than I could have ever imagined, growing up as a kid. And it's so much better and so much more beautiful and healthy. And then looking forward, like, okay, well, how do we make that even that much better, right? And so it can actually be kind of challenging. It's like, the inspiration behind that. But for me, it's always just been trying to find the best version of Dave Allred and always leaning into progression and, just personal development and what it looks like. Really trying to find how can I be the most impactful? How can I find the most happiness? How can I create the most amount of value for other people? and really find, my God-given potential and how I can share that with other people.
Well, you just hit on something interesting about finding your God-given potential. Someone that's kind of seeking to understand that more effectively, or in a deeper form. How do you feel like you have reached in to understand that better?
It's a big question. I would say, I think that the challenges and the adversity that I've dealt with in my life, I'm so grateful for what that's created in my life. And I'm sure we'll jump into some of that, but I feel like, they say iron sharpens iron, right? And when you have a chance to really go through something uncomfortable and very hard, challenging that you don't maybe understand at the time, in hindsight, that's where the greatest progression, the greatest growth comes from.
Mm.
And it took me some time to realize that and have that perspective. But now it's like I always want. I feel like a superpower for me is to I become comfortable being uncomfortable, right? So the ability to be comfortable being uncomfortable is such a valuable skill set, and frankly, it's something that's not. It's becoming less common, and I feel like nowadays, people always want to find that instant dopamine hit. They want to take the course of least resistance. And I've just found that sometimes that's not where the fulfillment comes from. It's from taking the harder road. Even in real estate, a lot of times if you find a deal or an opportunity that has some hair on it, it's challenging, right? It creates a barrier of entry where people aren't willing to come in and do the hard work. A lot of times that's where the greatest yield or the greatest upside are those deals that were a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think, and I actually talk about this a tiny bit on the podcast, but I think one of the most powerful paradigm shifts a human can have is when they realize those trials and the hardships and even the intentional hardships that you put yourself through, those are typically the biggest gifts that you could ever go through or have in your life. And when you realize that those hardships are the gifts, and normally it takes a long time to see that. But
The hard thing though is when you're in those moments,
oh
the perspective is different, right? You don't really value that.
yeah.
Most people look at that as a really negative thing, and there's a bunch of excuses, and it's like the victim mindset, and it's like more like poor me,
Yeah.
right? But once for me now, I'm really trying to look at those opportunities as, okay, this is a God-given opportunity. There's a reason for it. I'm not sure what the outcome's going to be or what that, what the blessing is in this challenge, but I know it's in there, and it's going to help me it's going to serve me later in my life in some capacity.
Yeah. And, our listeners at home, I just want to give the invitation. I would say probably more than 50% of you are probably going through some of the hardest moments of your life. And what Dave just said, like the perspective during that is very easy to go towards the negative. My invitation is to seek and find the gifts that these hardships are that are in your life and the gifts that they will bring, and just keep that in your mind that this is. And I want to get into your childhood because there's going to be a ton more credibility to what you just said because of what you've went through and you've gotten to see the true value of hardship. And so the invitation at home is whatever you're going through, and no matter the level of hardness, there's gifts to be found in it. And my invitation is that you find them right now. And if you need help finding them, I think praying, asking God, what are the learnings that I can experience through this hardship? What are the gifts here? And I promise you'll receive an answer in time with that. But Dave, let's dive into your childhood. Help paint a picture of what mini Dave went through with your family, and yeah.
So grew up in a small town here in Utah. I don't know how much time I spent on that, but it was a challenging phase for me. At the time it felt really, really intense. Very low income. My dad was a supervisor at the correctional facility. My mom was a kind of stay-at-home mom. But we didn't have a lot of resources. It was always really tight. remember going to like Bishop's Storehouse, getting food, on the, once a month. But more importantly, it was just, my parents, they always had their challenges, and they always try to stay together for the kids, but ended up getting separated. I think it was 3 times for extended periods of time, coming back together. And I just remember it was always these arguments, and generally it was about money, right? Like finances, and which is pretty common. But it was really intense, and it was a lot. My older sister ran away when she was 15. I ended up running away right when I turned 17. And when I say ran away, it wasn't just like moved out, but it was, out my window with a backpack and a garbage bag full of clothes and all my belongings, and had no idea where I was going to go.
What led up to you running away?
Well, I want to preface this by saying I want to honor my parents. I mean, I think that we all do the best that we know how to do with the knowledge and the resources that we have. And for my mom, it was hard. I think, I put myself in now as a parent with 4 kids, like I understand just how hard parenting is. And there is no, instruction manual or like a Bible on how to do it right. And so we're always trying to figure out as we go. But, it was just a extreme lack of freedom. It was always grounded. It was always very controlling. Is probably the right word. And it was very dysfunctional. It was. I think she was very stressed out. There was a lot on her plate, and and it was just it's probably too much detail to go into in depth, but there wasn't a lot of freedom. There weren't a lot of resources, which, by the way, looking back at that as a 45-year-old, it's really interesting. I never really pieced this together until more recently. I'm so focused, like a core motivator for Dave Allred is freedom. And I've been so driven to create maximum freedom in my life as an adult, right? Whether that's time freedom, financial freedom, lifestyle freedom. And I never correlated that. Maybe that's because that's something I didn't really have when I was young, right? Financial freedom has been so important to me in creating that for my family. And maybe that's because, I don't want to have to fight about it. I don't want to have that contention or that friction in my own home. And so, again, what I've really learned here is it's about how you frame things in life, right? Like you can frame this tough childhood and these tough circumstances as an excuse as to where we are today and what's happening today and what's going to happen in the future. Or, you can take accountability for it and say, okay, that did happen, but I get to choose how I want to frame that to be an empowering, more of an abundance mindset where I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to figure out what didn't work. I'm going to be the architect and take those data points in that situation and then rebuild my future as the architect that's in charge behind the steering wheel, right? Empowered, because the truth is we all have free agency, and every single day we get to choose what we're going to do that day. And at the end of the day, our lives are really just an accumulation of the decisions we make along the way. And that's on us. We can't blame anybody else for what we do right now.
I love that. I think, when it comes to childhood learning, you typically learn more of what not to do than what to do. And I want to preface this question with a story that I had, or just the life experience. I felt like my dad did a ton of things right in life, and he was a unreal business owner. But I remember as a child him not being there for a lot of my birthdays, and that this is like a minuscule piece of like, what, as a father figure, I'll never miss any of my kids' birthdays. And I'm curious for you, what were some things that you learned what you're going to do the opposite of, other than the control aspect? Because I've been with you when you're talking with your kids, and I know the level of freedom that you give them and how you inspire them to grow. I'm curious what are some of the learnings that you had from your parents that you decided to break the chain?
Yeah, I love it. That's a great question. And let me just finish that last question, and then I'm going to circle back to this one.
Perfect.
So ran away, I was 17, found a semi truck that was unlocked. Actually slept. They had like these little cots behind the driver's seat. Slept there that night. I think it was like 3 or 4 nights, just trying to figure out what I was going to go and do. And ended up at a friend's house on the couch for a little while. Then found a little house about 7 miles away, $120 a month for rent. And the ceiling's caving in. We're just living off fast food, ramen noodles, and just trying to survive. And then my little brother, he got emancipated and moved in with me, and so he was 16. So it's just my brother and I just trying to just trying to figure it out and make it happen. Um, and then kind of fast forward a little bit, decided to go on a mission. And it was actually more so kind of a logical decision, whereas like, a lot of my friends and stuff were in a downhill trajectory, and I was looking at my life circumstances. I'm like, hey, what? I know this is going to be hard, but I'm just going to go and lean into doing something really hard. One of my favorite quotes, by the way, as a kid, was from Jerry Rice, and he was one of my favorite athletes. And the quote was something like, I will do today what others will not, so that tomorrow I can have what others cannot. And it was this idea of like delayed gratification, right? And I had no idea what I was going to do or how I was going to do it. I just remember I was going to do whatever it takes to figure it out and to be able to create something better for myself, my future family. And that intensity, again, I had no idea how I was going to do it. I just knew when the opportunities came up, I was going to take advantage of them. And, in hindsight, so mission, it was great. I learned a lot.
Where'd you go?
Peru. Arequipa, Peru. Yeah.
Go.
And, it was so hard, but it was also getting lost in that selfless service was really beautiful. And then I had the opportunity to be an assistant to the president for 6 months. So I learned a lot about leadership, and grew so much from that, right? Came home, really nobody was at the airport waiting for me, which now every time I get off the plane in Salt Lake City and you walk out the gate, right, and there's this huge crowds of people, and I was kind of like a little bit sad because that wasn't the experience for me. I actually got back and I stayed at my old boss's house. His name is Clint Ashton, and he's a hero of mine. He was somebody that he was kind of that father figure for me a little bit, maybe. And my dad, by the way, he worked 2 jobs, like 2 full-time jobs, most of my childhood, double shifts. And so, he was never really around kind of sports and whatever else. I got back. And so I lived on Clint's couch for a couple of weeks, which is really awkward in their front room. He ended up giving me his truck and kind of got me a little kickstart there. Wow. After the mission. But backing up to when I was a teenager, I just remember him speaking possibility into me. And it was the first time I really felt, somebody that I saw as a mentor that I looked up to that spoke possibility into me. And I honor him for that, because I think that a lot of times we as humans, we have so many limiting beliefs, right? So much just negativity around us, how we talk to ourselves, we're very self-critical. And so when people can speak real, authentic possibility into people, it's such a huge motivator, man. People need more of that. Even as a dad, as a father, as a CEO, as a business leader, that's something that I've learned, is that people want people showing trust in somebody and speaking possibility to them is one of the greatest motivators. And it's so empowering, and it makes you feel great too, because you can see that impact that you can create in another
Lights
person.
People up.
It really does, man. And so got back from that, and then
really quick on that, do you remember any of those conversations? Like, how do you have the conversation to dive into someone and give them possibilities when all you've seen, you just came from living in the back of a diesel truck, then going on a mission, and you didn't see any financial anything or business experience that's a level of success that so like, how do you get that, how do you dive that possibility into someone?
Well, I think that innately everybody wants to do good, right? We want to be good people, we want to make a positive impact, and a lot of times that just gets forgotten in the process because of maybe it's issues, problems, just stress, whatever that is. And so I think it's innately in all of us. But I think that, well, that's the first thing I was going to say. Secondly is it has to be authentic. So if you just say that to somebody, you don't even really know them, it's not going to land very well, and it's actually disingenuous. But as you get to know somebody, I think it's just observing goodness, the possibility, the potential, right, that somebody has, and then just making it a habit to acknowledge that, even real time. So you're talking with your kids, you're talking to your spouse, you're talking to a friend, a colleague, a coworker, a business partner, and you see that attribute, maybe it's repeated, maybe it's even just one act that they do, and just acknowledge it. Just take a second and just say it. And I promise it will never not land excellently. Like, people want recognition, right? And so if you can just be that person that will acknowledge the positivity and the good and those special characteristics, those unique attributes that people resonate. I've never had anybody like, dude, don't ever say that again. Like, no, you're wrong, right? People they want to be built up, and I think it goes a long way. But that's the best thing I could say is just in the moment when you see it, acknowledge it. And then thirdly is when you have, like, for example, core values in my business or at my home. We have 10 guiding principles, the Allred family 10 guiding principles in every single one of our kids' bedrooms on the wall. And so when I see them living those values, right? Like, one of them is Allreds don't quit. And so if my son wants to quit football team or whatever, I don't have to be the bad guy. I'm just like, hey, core value number 4 or guiding principle number 4, Allreds don't quit. And what's beautiful now is my kids will manage themselves and they'll say it to each other. So I don't even have to be the one that says that. But I think it's just acknowledging it, it's looking for it. I think all that also came from my leadership career. So in the mission, and then also coming back from that, I jumped into door-to-door sales, direct-to-home sales. Supposed to be, one summer in Chicago, 4 months. Hardest thing I'd ever done, honestly. 80% of the guys quit. There's only 3 of us that finished the summer, and it was so challenging. It was so hard, so much failure. But I was able to stick through that, and I made $31,000, which to this day was the most meaningful money I've ever made in my life. It's more than my parents ever made. It was like, I thought it was great. Went back to Snow College, and I bought the Isuzu Rodeo with the chrome rim package. It's probably before your date, but it was. I thought it was pretty cool back then. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Anyway, and then came back. It was enough to come back the next year as a sales manager, top first-year sales manager in the company. Made $157,000. The next year as a regional manager, $250,000. Was able to grow it from there. But I really feel like, if some of those early mentors hadn't spoken that possibility into me, also my mission president, he always just like helping me see the best version of myself. Todd Peterson at Vivint, he's always just helping me see this potential, even though I didn't see that potential maybe at the time. But that, I'll be eternally grateful for those people that helped me in those younger years with that. So then it turned into a 16-year leadership career, managing 121 sales teams across the country, in 41 states. And in those leadership capacities, a lot of that same concept of acknowledging people's possibility and speaking to that, really I was able to refine that a lot more. And now it's just kind of become like muscle memory, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, when we've talked together, I've felt you trust me, as a a business owner, because something that's special about our relationship is I've been able to have our business help capture your father's life story as well as your in-laws, and through our conversations, it was business, but I also felt like you trusted me, and I put that on my shoulder of like, hey, he's given me good trust here. And so I felt you do that even to someone that's not in your, in your own business and just in your pure leadership. That came across to me,
Thanks, man.
Which is really cool.
I appreciate that. So your question earlier was, so what did I maybe not have, as a child or, growing up that I've been very intentional about trying to create now. Right. So I think one of those was freedom. Talk about that. Financial freedom was a big part of it. Third of that was to give, my kids space to have some free agency and to let them figure it out on their own, which is really hard because for me, one of the scariest things was the idea of being a dad and being a father, even getting married, honestly, is like that. I didn't have maybe the best, I didn't have like the manual for that. And so I was really concerned I wasn't able to do it very well. Which, by the way, for anybody that's expecting to be a parent or aspiring for that, it's not. It's actually the most incredible thing. It's the thing I'm most proud of, and the thing that I've actually gotten the most fulfillment, hands down, probably 10 times more fulfillment from the family, the kids, and my wife than any business success that I've had. And so nothing to be scared of. But I do think it takes a lot of intentionality, right?
Yeah.
And realizing, okay, well, what do we want to stand for? How are we going to handle these type of situations as life unfolds, as it always does? What do we stand for? What are our principles? What are our core values? What are our non-negotiables? What's our purpose statement? All these different things. And if you have that foundation and that, if you will, that North Star, then the rest of it's just, it'll play out how it's supposed to play out. So we didn't have a lot of structure. We never talked about taxes, investing, real estate, business, entrepreneurialism, any of that. Just quality of life. We didn't. The only vacations we went on were to national parks, and I thought my parents just loved national parks, but I think it was because it's like $15 to get into the national park, right? So we went to Yellowstone a ton of times, Grand Canyon. But it is interesting. So again, that was the experience. And by the way, while you're in that, like, you just kind of take it for granted. Like, it is what it is. You don't have a lot of comparison points to it, right? But I knew I wanted to create a much higher standard. And so if you ask like what my mission statement was, and I couldn't articulate this clearly, but it was to reset the standard. And it was to reset the standard for myself and for my future family in how we approach in resolving trauma, in creating impact, success, quality of life, legacy. And that's been such a big mission for me. And frankly, as it's been hard or challenging along the way, and it's not even just those things, it's launching a new business. It's, helping bring Topgolf into Utah County here. Like that was kind of, is a big bite. And I didn't know exactly how we were going to do it, but I will say I've always gotten a lot of energy from just, always, taking a big bite and not knowing how I'm going to do it exactly, but just figuring it out as we go. But as things have been challenging, what I'm grateful for, Jackson, I'll say this, I'm actually not like necessarily grateful for having gone through some of those things that were really hard. Like ideally, I kind of wish I maybe didn't have to do that, but I am very grateful for the side effect or the person that's helped me to become, because it's basically like logs. Okay. And so every time there's when it gets cold, really hard, like it's an extra log to throw on the fire, right? Or it's an extra reserve tank when everybody else is running out of gas, like that first year knocking doors, and everybody's quitting, like dropping off like flies. Like it's literally 2 other people left, right? And it's an extra tank of gas to pop in there, right? It's that emotional reserve. That's in the intensity that helped me to get through some of those more challenging parts of my life.
Yeah. It's it's your you're winning, or you're stacking your wins of getting through this adversity that you had to go through, it sounds like. And yeah, I have a couple moments where it's like, hey, if I was able to get through that, like this is way easier. And so I think that's super important.
One thing I've always loved, this concept of, if it scares you, you should just do it.
Yeah.
It generally means, not always, but generally it means you should do it. And so for me, like there's very few things that I can say I'm scared of in my life, right? Open water swimming, one of them. I've done a few endurance events with the Iron Cowboy, and like the swimming portion of it's bad. It's really bad. I've got a swim coach. He was like, I've never seen this before. You're just not buoyant. I'm like, well, why? She's like, I don't know. I've never seen this before. So working on that one. The second one is like stand-up comedy. It's always kind of scared me. So I'm going to do that in 2026. It's
Let's
one
go.
of my goals. Number 3
Let me
is
know where I can buy the ticket. I'll come.
And number 3 is the idea of like my beautiful girls dating. Like it still kind of scares me. I got to work through that one still. I'm not sure. But besides those, like you really can, there's nothing else I'm aware of in my life that I'm scared of, or that, I'm nervous about. And I think that's the result of just having done it. Kind of like, if it scares you, like you just go do it. And then once you do it, you're not going to be scared of it anymore.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I'm talking to a man that has built a lot of those wins and stacked them. And so I think that's where the fear kind of goes away, because you face these hard things and you realize, it's like, if I've gone through these, then I can go through these. And I love that you're proactively attacking your fears. like I think majority of the world, public speaking, which you do all the time, or stand-up comedy, like that's it feels vulnerable, and you're putting yourself out there. So that's awesome. I'm curious, with with being a father, what does that mean, and how do you show up different with a son versus a daughter?
Hmm. So we got 3 girls and 1 boy. What does it mean? I would say, I mean, best case scenario for me is, one of my mission statement is I want to create a positive dent in the universe, right? And also that I want to be the superhero that my children need me to be for them.
Mm.
And also to be a family man with a business, not a businessman with a family. So there are 3 things that come to mind that I try to, and again, but for the record, I got a lot of work to do still. I'm still, I hope none of this comes across as like I've figured things out. It's definitely all a work in progress, as is life, right? It's just a continual opportunity to progress and get better. But that's what I think, at least for me, that's my goal. I think that with kids, again, I was so nervous about being a father for whatever reasons. And, my wife, it's challenging.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, I just, my reference point was dysfunction and a lot of negative emotions, a lot of, trauma, a lot of, not a lot of unconditional love per se, and again, I want to again honor my parents. I think that and I love them, and I think that they're amazing people. I think that parenting can be really challenging. And again, nobody's like, there's not a coach that's like, hey, this is how you're supposed to handle this situation, and then being a dad myself and going through some of that, it's like, yeah, I mean, I had plenty of mistakes I've made, my wife and I have made, especially with our first, and as we grow as parents as well. And, I hope they forgive me for some of those, mistakes and, lack of doing it perfectly. And so I want to make sure I give my parents grace for that. But at the same time, it was just so many, and unfortunately, I think that there's some science around this where we remember things that are negative, we give them like 3 times more weight than positive things, right? And so on that note, I just want to reference this. Yeah, I will probably come back to this one. Okay, right now. So with your whole process of creating a legacy video for my dad, initially that was kind of a foreign idea. I mean, I reached out to you about it, right? And it was something I knew I wanted to do it, but at the same time, it was kind of like, well, shoot, like, if my dad wasn't really always around as much as I wanted to be in my childhood, and there's still some resentment or whatever else. But, as we go through this whole process, it was so beautiful, man. Like, we were able to really acknowledge him for everything that his life was, his legacy, where he came from, his parents, him growing up, being a dad, and actually showing my kids all the challenges that he went through as a kid and how that relates to, being a kid in general, the relationship between him and his parents, and the challenges of, or the experience of being married and having us, and then life takeaways. And then there's a whole chapter you created for us on posterity and like what he wants to leave with his posterity. Right. And so not only is this just like such a beautiful concept, so I want to recognize you for that. It's like such a great way to be able to remember somebody, right? Versus just going into ancestry.com or whatever else and you see a little genealogy chart and there's a picture. Like if you asked me, Jackson, about my grandparents, I can tell you, one was in the Navy, the other one was in the Army, he lived in Japan, like a few high level details, but I never knew them, right? Their tonality, their personality, their humor, their demeanor, what they stand for. And so I personally feel like that's one of the greatest gifts you could give somebody is the opportunity to share with the world or share with people they care about what they stand for and what they wanted their impact in this world to be. And so, but secondarily to that, it was actually a very healing process for my family because we're able to have some of those hard conversations, which it did lead to some uncomfortable conversations. But ultimately, I think it's allowed my family, my siblings to be able to let go of a lot of their resentment and replace that with gratitude and appreciation for the person.
Wow. I mean, that gives me chills, that's.
It should, man. That's the important stuff right there, right? To be able to remember somebody for and recognize them. And for my dad, he's got Parkinson's disease, 11 years in now, and he's not going to be around, unfortunately. It's a chronic degenerative disease, so he's not going to be around very long. And so, I wanted to be able to, so thank you for helping us to create that opportunity to be able to create that space. And it's not even just for us; it's for him. And that was one of the most the third takeaway here, or the deliverable that you helped us with here, is actually, by us allowing to, if you will, cut the cord of holding on to some of that, it allows him to take that weight off of his shoulders, right? So that he can not have to hold on to that as he goes through, the rest of his life and beyond. And then I recently thought about this as well, as it actually cuts the cord both ways, where, let's say maybe he had some issues that he had to deal with his parents, right? And they're holding on to that. And for them to be able to see that release or cut that cord, it actually goes maybe in three ways, because it's also for my children. They don't have to hold on to any of those generational patterns, right? And release them and their kids. And it's that whole trickle down effect where it's not, it's a ripple effect. It's probably the right word.
Well, you're talking about generational trauma, and there's a lot of science behind it, but in a simple version, there's not too many things that get passed on to your DNA, but the negative trauma from your grandparents actually get passed down to the DNA of your grandchildren, and they might react. Your grandchildren might react in a way that's foreign to them, and for some reason they get triggered by something because of the trauma that their grandparents went through. And so it's so special to hear you talk about this, because literally with what what we got to do together, like you healed the generational trauma, and you're doing it on both sides of your family, which is just so special. And I honor you taking on the role of being the guy that made it happen. And I'm curious with your dad's story, what was something that you learned?
Well, to start with, it was funny when I first talked to my dad about this. He's like, absolutely not. He's like, I'll write down some stuff. I'll, create a journal you can, share with your, kids and grandkids. And I'm like, no, Dad, I want this to be human. I want it to be you. I want them to know you as a person. And he was still, very reluctant about it. And by the way, we're now doing this for my father-in-law, and that was his exact same word for word. Absolutely not. And then they warmed up to it more. And the tipping point. So if anybody in your audience is listening and they want to do this and they're in the same situation, the hack or the cheat code here to making it work was talking to my kids, and then my kids going to my dad and saying, "Hey, Grandpa, we want to know about it. We want to hear more about your life." And that was where you're like, "Oh, all right, fine, put me in, coach." Right. And then it was actually an incredible process from there. It was actually really easy. You guys did a great job on that. So what was your question again? Sorry.
It was what you learned from that whole experience. But you talked about your dad kind of sharing what he wanted his posterity to remember. What do you feel like were things that stuck out from your own dad?
Yeah. I would say that two things come to mind. One is that he worked really, really hard to try to be a provider for our family. Even if I didn't see him, I didn't know where he was or what he was doing. He had a great work ethic. Number two was that he has a great heart, and like at his core, he has a great heart. And that's something I never really was able to see through because of all the other emotions that you hold on to. And so just being able to look a little bit deeper and past the memories, or like the perception, the emotion, and looking at the person and their heart and where their intentions are. And so I think he's an incredible person, incredible heart, and being able to and being able to actually recognize that, because with my mom, you're getting me emotional here, Jackson. My mom, I can generally say, like, I have no regrets in my life, and I'm really proud of that. Like I have lessons learned, but I don't have regrets. But 5 years ago, I was at a Topgolf city meeting with a design team. And I got a call that my mom, anyway, so we showed up. My she's living in one of my townhomes, and she'd fallen and hit her head on a nightstand, and was unconscious for, I guess, like a day and a half, and eventually passed away. And all by herself, she had meal delivery service, and they missed like 3 meals. And so we got a call that there's a potential issue, and we found her on the floor, and she'd passed away, and it was really hard because, I actually say that probably the one regret that I do hold on to a little bit still is I never had a chance to tell her, hey, I know you're the best, you know how to do, and I appreciate everything that you did do for us. And so, um, so anyway, it's just interesting in life how it kind of plays out, and we realize that, again, people want to be. We don't intentionally, make some of the mistakes that we make in life, and we're all human. We all have our own weaknesses. We all have our own blind spots. We all have our own, issues people are working through, and we just got to give people grace. Give them a little bit of grace for effort or for where their heart is in the process.
Well, I think just what's coming to my mind with what you're saying is um, so much of that resonates with me. I mean, the whole reason that company started to capture people's lives and stories because I wasn't able to do it for my dad, and so that regret that you feel with your mom a little bit, I guarantee you show up with your wife, and I bet you give more of the validation through going through that hard experience. Then on the other piece of that, I think your mom knows, the level of love and respect that you have for her. And I just hope that you understand that she knows that. And of course you'd rather vocalize it while she's there. But I'm just a strong believer that the level of love that we all have for each other, especially when they pass, they have an understanding. And then with your dad, I saw a man that felt guilty for, like some of the things of his past. But I felt so much love that he had for all of you guys. And this is such an interesting podcast because it's very different.
Yeah, but I've never had a podcast like this. Usually talking about real estate, taxes, building businesses and whatnot.
But I just think it's important to know, or I'm so happy that you were able to see that, and your kids will too, and they probably did.
And the timing was great because his, Parkinson's, it's starting to really get a lot worse. And so, and actually had recommended the two close friends and a business partner that they reach out to you and get started on this process, and they dragged their feet a little bit. One of them just lost their dad about 2-3 weeks ago. And another one was he has Alzheimer's, and he can't really communicate anymore. And so, for any audience members thinking about doing this, I would just say, hey, the time is now. Tomorrow is not guaranteed, and I think that'd be something I would have really regretted if I didn't get a chance to actually capture this when we could still capture it.
Well, thank you, and I can't agree more to what you just said. I've been doing this for years now, and I've seen a lot of people drag their feet a tiny bit and literally lose their loved ones, and then they feel a big level of regret. So I agree with the invitation to focus on now and have the urgency, because you really don't know. My father passed away at 63, unexpectedly, and you just don't get to take those moments back. And so for your loved ones that you do have here, one, I'd just say really let them know how much you love them. And so every once in a while, just from my work experience and stuff, I'll send these random texts or voicemails or calls where they're, pretty vulnerable, but I'll never regret that. And even though it feels uncomfortable sometimes, like really pouring into your loved ones, it's one of the most beneficial things that you can do for your relationship as well as for your own soul and their soul. Because no one's perfect, and everyone in every relationship screws up in some shape or form. And just owning that we all need mercy and love, and it's really powerful.
Yeah, and I think that made me think of your previous question, like with my kids, like, what are some things that maybe I didn't have and that is working now. One of the things that's worked great for us is actually leaning into the idea of vulnerability and authenticity and just being very real. And, I think when I was in my earlier years as a dad, I thought I had to always show up as this, very stoic, like, hey, this is, I'm perfect. This is, there's no imperfections. There's no vulnerabilities. Like I have to be the example of a perfect dad. right? And over the last couple of years, my wife and I have tried to lean more into just being 100% real and having the space to be authentic and to be able to have conversations and even, about ourselves and like where we're maybe not showing up or where we want to improve or or even, for example, just talking about like my childhood. Until 2 years ago, my kids had no idea. We never talked about this at all. Even with my wife, the first couple of years, I never talked about it. It wasn't something yeah, I didn't wear it on my sleeve for sure. I definitely wasn't going to talk on a podcast about it, but what I realized is the more I can be authentic and really just be myself, it creates the space for other people that you care about to also feel that way. Right. And even for, with my dad, for me, it was personal work, understanding the principle of the miracle of forgiveness and being able to really forgive and to be able to heal, I guess is the word, right? On substances. And then therefore I was able to feel comfortable enough to be able to have those conversations, to be able to even talk to him or even entertain the idea of then capturing all that into a legacy video. Right. But if I didn't do that, again, I'm not trying to take credit. This is more of a principle is if I didn't do that work first and get to a place where I felt there's space for that, then that none of this would have ever played out. So it's kind of an interesting case study on, your personal, your own personal mindset, your own personal, how you show up has such a big ripple effect on everybody else and what kind of impact you can create for others. But if you're not there, you really can't, if your container doesn't have the capacity, then you're not going to be able to really create that value that you want to.
Yeah. Um, Along with that, this new study between us, I'm curious from the realization that you gotta go through this trauma or look into it and learn from it. Just the realization from there. What was like your next step to slowly get to this level of healing? Because I would say majority of people that experience what you've experienced never reach a level of healing.
Yeah. I would say there may be two things that come to mind on that one. The first one is understanding the power of gratitude, and the gratitude is it's one of the strongest emotions, right? I actually heard on a social media post a few months back, but that that gratitude was considered like the highest frequency, like highest vibration. You can feel it, but actually authenticity is the highest frequency. So when somebody's being very authentic, you can just feel it. You can literally feel it, and that was really interesting. But I think gratitude's right up there, and so what I've found is if I can just focus on all these things to be grateful for. I mean, cool. I just shared all my story about how hard it was, but same time, live in America, greatest country in the world. I'm healthy. Live in Utah, beautiful scenery all around us. I can get in a vehicle and drive. I don't have to walk. I can, I can go and create whatever I want to in my life, and I get to control that. And there's so many things to be incredibly grateful for, right? Even looking back at that time, having been in Peru for 2 years and seeing what some of those people have to deal with and like the living conditions, the quality of life, and the lack of freedom. So it's all about perspective. It's just, I think the more that I can lean into gratitude, it empowers me more into an abundance mindset versus getting stuck in scarcity or even worrying about those things from my past reoccurring in the future because I'm in control of it. I'm in the driver's seat. Nobody else, life happens for me, not to me, Tony Robbins, right? And therefore, I get to choose the direction and ultimately the destination of my life. Second thing was going to be what I call lifestyle design, and it's a whole podcast in of its own. But when I was 30 years old, I sat down and I put together a spreadsheet, and it turned into this document. It's 10 different tabs. So it's 10 areas of my life that I want to be great at and have no regret and live life with purpose, passion, and impact and success. And so the first one is my purpose statement, and that includes my non-negotiables, my core values, and also I took the time to write a eulogy, which is really interesting. If somebody's trying to figure out what their purpose statement is, or like what their legacy, what they want their legacy to be, one of the greatest ways to do that is figure out what you'd want people to say about you at your funeral, right? Your friends, family, neighbors, your kids. And so sit down and take some time and write your own eulogy, right? Which, by the way, best practice. Don't do that in a note on your iPhone, and then just share it with your wife without telling her why you're sending that to her. My wife's like, what the hell is this? Anyway, it's kind of a funny story, inside joke, but is writing down your eulogy, right? What you want to say for. So that's the first chapter. Number 2 is health. Then it's time, business, finance, family, spiritual experiences, and relationships. And so I took the time on all 10 of those different tabs to write down how I want to live my life. And it's a living document. Every month I try to sit down at least once a month, update that. And it's been really powerful, man. It's a really clear blueprint for how I want to live my life, what I am willing to do, what I'm not willing to do, what my priorities are. And that's really helped me to be able to, I would say, accelerate things in my life, because most people meander through life based on motivation. And I hate motivation. Motivation it's an emotion. It's a fleeting emotion. So motivation really doesn't serve you very well. It's short term. For me, what works is figuring out what's the end goal, what's that North Star, what really matters to me. So I'm on my deathbed looking back at my life, what's going to weigh the most, what's going to matter the most, and then reverse engineer it from that into what should my daily habits be and my priorities, and where do I allocate my time.
Oh, well, it makes sense why you're on these stages, like teaching this process. It's
One more thing on that one, youth lifestyle design. So 3 years ago, I decided to create that for my kids. So it's just a watered down version of it. Same thing, 10 sections. And so all my kids have gone through that same process, have it in writing. Once a summer, we'll sit down and update that. I got to tell you, man, as a dad, like that's pretty badass. Like that's pretty fun for me to be able to have my kids have what they see their highest and best use of their time and their life working on. And it's going to evolve, right? Like my 10-year-old, it's actually really cute, you know. But to have that type of intentionality, and even just understand that thought process of being able to, manifest or create what you really want in your life based on knowing what's important to you, has been really interesting. By the way, both those resources are on my website, daveallred.com. It's a free download. You listeners want to download
we'll
that.
put it in the link too. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna go do it myself after this. I think we're both people that we both have a focus on sharpening the saw, and not just hacking away at life. Where do you think that came from for you?
That's actually a dot that I just recently connected as well, which is, I think for me, and by the way, I don't like always just blaming it or like tying everything to your childhood, right? It's way more complex than that. I think nowadays, a lot of times it sounds like, oh, that's because your childhood, right? There's definitely a lot there, but it's not the only thing. But I think maybe this, this intense need for structure and logic, like that it makes sense, maybe comes from just, like this whole lifestyle design and 10 different areas and everything's reverse engineered and very intentional, which, by the way, I think it served me well in my life. But I think maybe it comes from just all this like chaos is, younger, when you're like, it didn't make sense and it felt illogical. It felt unfair. It felt whatever. And so it's now, okay, I need some structure that makes sense to Dave Allred. So maybe that's where it came from. It's that, but then it's also, I love that expression that discipline equals freedom. And I really believe in that. I think a lot of people believe that, the more disciplined you are, then the less freedom you're going to have because you're so structured. My experience has been by having this discipline and this structure and knowing the fundamentals, the priorities are taken care of, like the home base is covered, that allows you to do so much more and have so much more flexibility and to go travel to 68 countries and running with the bulls and Mount Everest expedition, or, being able to go 20th anniversary and go jump on a yacht for 10 days, right? Or this Christmas season, kids wanted to go to the Arctic Circle for 2 weeks and go up there and go visit Norway and Estonia and end up in Miami for 4 days to get sunburns for the contrast, right? Whatever, like that lifestyle freedom. I say a lot of that has come from being able to have a very disciplined approach to things that are a priority, and then that creates more freedom. But does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
Mentally, you think that discipline, like extreme discipline, is going to result in a lack of freedom. My life experience has been the opposite.
Yeah, you chose hard up front so that your life is easy now, and also I think the power of showcasing to your kids what's possible It's like one of the greatest gifts you can give. At least a lot of studies show that the number one gift that you can give is as a father is showing that you love your wife. And so like taking your kids to Greece and doing all that, it's like so powerful. But two, you've also lifted off any type of limitation or roof of what's possible to your kids. And it's always interesting. Like I'm always curious on where people feel with like giving and inheritance and things like that, because also inheritance can be the detriment to a lot of people. But I just know the steps that you're doing right now are very powerful for your kids and the success of their future. You're setting them on the trajectory to success.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you want?
Yeah, that's interesting, though, right? Because like the mission was always, reset the standard and
Mhm.
create these opportunities, open the doors of opportunities, create quality of life, avoid a lot of those, challenges and those hardships, which I think is it's a very respectable principle or concept, right? I came to this realization a year or two ago, and it was really special for me. I was like, you know what? Actually, my wife and I we went through this keynote presentation with like the 16 most common generational patterns that transfer through generations, and it was really beautiful. I sat there for 20 minutes, went through the whole thing, and like we couldn't think of one of those things that is transferring on to the next generation. Maybe that's giving ourselves too much credit. That's the credit that we took for ourselves, but um, and so anyway, it's that whole idea of resetting the standard, and feeling like that mission has been accomplished was really, really beautiful. It was like a big kind of milestone, if you
Yeah.
will. Again, so much more work to be done and just, progress, but that felt really good to know. Hey, it's been such a high priority, and we actually did it.
Yeah. It's amazing.
But with the kids, looking forward, there's the whole Rockefeller concept where generally, one. So Ed Milet talks about it beautifully. He calls it the one. Every family, eventually there's this one person that comes along, and they're the one to completely change the game, to completely reset everything for future generations. But then you look at it from a financial standpoint, and generally it's two generations, right? So generally somebody does well, they have some abundance, and their kids are going to enjoy that, and then their kids they're screwed. Like
Yep.
it's just this downward spiral. And it's very, very uncommon that can get past 3 generations where that will continue to grow or compound or even just sustain itself. And so for us, I'll just hit that real quick. So it's something I've worried about a lot over the years. And what we do, and I'll share this with you just in case it adds value for your listener base. One is this concept that nothing is given, everything is earned. We say it all the time. Kids want something like, hey, nothing's earned, nothing's given, everything's earned. Secondly is I want our kids to be producers. And so we talk about it a lot. We do a Sunday principle of the week every Sunday. And that's a topic that's a recurring theme is how do we produce value and contribute? And last year I challenged all 4 of my kids to become entrepreneurs. So they all started their own businesses. 3 of the 4 are now cash flow positive, and they'll have
Let's
their own.
go.
It's amazing. They talk about,
Wow.
that's one of my favorite things, honestly, like that has been really incredible. When you asked that question at the beginning, like what I'm most excited about is seeing them continue to grow their businesses. And my daughters have scaled into 3 locations now. And like, anyways, I don't have time to go into that, but it's really, really exciting. Another one is we set up the Allred Family Foundation. And so all 4 of my kids are on the board of directors, and they get to choose whatever cause they want to support. And so, my youngest, she's helping the local animal shelter and the homeless shelter. My son is helping warriors, vets. Warrior Rising is the foundation. I help with Parkinson's Foundation. My daughters are helping single mothers and also helping with human trafficking work. So, but it's really cool because they get to choose that and have some autonomy and some ownership over who they want to contribute to. And then a percentage of all their income, as well as the wages that they earn working for me, go into that as well. And so great way to be able to teach how to make money matter and to see them light up. And what's really cool is when we talked about, hey, how much do you want to donate, this month or this year? And last year, 2 of them were like, actually, I want to go above and beyond that. And they did even more. Anyway, proud dad moments. Sorry to take the whole time talking
No,
about
I
that
mean,
stuff, but
to me, that's like that fires me up. That's so cool. I'm curious because I was reading a financial book, and it was like all these financial principles. And then there was one chapter about, you can have everything, but if you don't have a fulfilled life, then it's all for nothing, and I kind of got to see that firsthand a little bit. I feel like my father did amazing, but I feel like he lacked fulfillment in a lot of like in a full level of fulfillment. So from a young age, that's been something really important to me. And in that book, it talked about someone that had it all, but they ended up taking their life. And it's like, how can that happen? And so a couple things around fulfillment is service. And I remember questioning myself, like, how can I proactively serve? And that's when I decided a percentage of everything I'd make, I'd give. That was different from like tithing or religion or anything, but like actually like proactively giving. I'm just curious how you guys kind of came to decide that for yourself.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. I think that I just want to make sure, originally, I probably started from a place, I want to make sure that my children understand what money really is. It's not about just another dollar in the bank or another zero. That's really empty. And now, with that being said, there's a time and a place, right, where in life that's so important. Like if I had a little more of that when I was in my teenage years or my early 20s, that would have made a big difference. So it is what I say. It's time based, or
Yeah, there's seasons.
yeah, there's seasonality too. That's a great way of saying it. But really, at the end of the day, money is just it's literally just currency. It's current, right? It should be used to create value and to multiply and to make a real impact. And so for me, today it's more about, I feel like I've figured out this whole financial thing, the investing side of it, tax strategies, passive income. Like we could geek out on that for a couple hours.
Which I want to get to that in a second, but
Okay.
keep going.
Yeah, happy to. But for me, it gets to a point where, there's this study, we talk about some scientific studies, right? When somebody's making enough, and at that time it was like $75,000 a year, the amount of additional enjoyment or satisfaction that you get from anything above that, it's incremental, and then it plateaus, and it actually can even go to a reverse, and where it actually becomes more things to worry about, more problems, more whatever. And so I think it's a big fallacy when people think that more money is going to equal more happiness. That's not been my experience at all. You get a big win and say, okay, let's go get some dinner with my wife and go celebrate for, a day. The next day it's like, okay, what's next? Like it really hasn't been that fulfilling per se. But for me, what it's been is when I look at what is money, and this is a good question to ask for anybody listening, is what does money mean to me? And we actually had this conversation on last Sunday's family principle of the week. And it was, for me, money equals freedom. It equals quality of life. It equals the ability to not have to think about money, which is nice, right? We spend so much of our lives just stressed out about that. It allows us to be able to give back and help others. It allows us to be able to have more autonomy and free agency in our lives. And I forget the rest of it. There's like 10 different things I rattled off for them. But for me, it's just like this. For me, I think the biggest thing for me has been it's freedom. It's freedom to be able to do what you feel called to do in life, to be able to go and pursue what you feel is your highest and best use of your God-given talents and whatever that is. And that's going to be different for everybody, right? But it's the ability to have ownership, autonomy, free agency, to be able to go out and do what really lights you up. And again, you can't, for most 21-year-olds, or college, like that's maybe not where their mind's at. But I think that earlier you can understand that principle and really lean into that mindset, it's going to serve you really well later on in life.
Besides door to door, I'm curious, what was one of your best financial decisions that you created?
So this might not make sense, but it does if you really think it through. It's who I married, right? One, because the biggest risk to any finances is not making it, right? But she's incredibly, she's a great steward of capital. We both grew up with very little resources. And so she's very responsible with our resources. So I would say that is the first and foremost. Number two would be actually something I created when I was 27 years old, and I call it the financial freedom equation.
Yeah.
And it's literally just another spreadsheet. My wife makes fun of me because I do spreadsheet. If I have anything that's important, it's a spreadsheet. I have hundreds of spreadsheets. But I call it the financial freedom equation, and it's really simple. It's a spreadsheet, and you start off with what's your burn rate or your cost of living for the year, right? Your cars, home, insurance, food, cell phone, whatever. Let's say it's $200,000. The next line item is what's my current passive income? Passive income just simply means money that's coming in without you having to trade time for the money, right? And so say you have $50,000 coming in from a fourplex, some dividend stocks, whatever else. Next line item is what's the gap? In that scenario, it's $150,000. The next line item was how many years am I willing to commit to achieving true financial freedom? And for me, it was 10 years. And so then you divide those numbers. In that scenario, it'd be $15,000 of additional recurring passive income per year to be able to achieve your true financial freedom number. And so for me, I did all of that. And then I realized, as a real estate guy, that's just 40 rental properties. So I need to have 40 rental properties to achieve true financial freedom. And then from that point forward, it was just reverse engineering that even more. Every single Sunday, sitting down, looking at it, hyper focused on it. And by the way, having your goals in writing like that, they say you're 42% more likely to hit your goal. I don't know how you track that, but it makes sense to me. It's not just the accountability, but it's seeing those micro improvements, those little tiny incremental improvements along the way that can be very motivating. And so for me, that wasn't a specific deal or an investment, but that helped me tremendously. So I hit that goal. Instead of 10 years, it was 6 years. And that's when I was able to retire officially from the door-to-door sales, leadership career and go full-time into being a dad, Axie Partners, the Top Golf, different projects that actually spoke to me that I really wanted to be doing in my life.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's also my website, free download, resources. It's called the Financial Freedom Equation.
I think there's going to be a lot of Excel sheets coming your guys' way with this podcast. Talk me through at age 30, you set a goal to do how many properties and what was that?
Yeah. So that 40 rental properties, that was the goal to get to my financial freedom number. When I hit that goal, I realized, this whole idea, this whole concept.
But you hit it a lot faster than 10 years.
I did. Yeah. It was 6 years later. And then the next goal was I wanted to have ownership in 1,000 rental properties by age 40. So that was like the big, hairy, audacious goal. I think goal setting for me has always been where it's big enough, where it's achievable. Like your brain is not gonna be like, there's absolutely no possible way, but it also scares you where you're kind of like, this is kind of crazy.
I love it.
I don't know if, because that creates emotion, right? It creates some excitement. It creates, even it is a little bit nervousness, but it creates emotion. And if you know how to channel that emotion to serve you, I think that can be a really powerful way of approaching your goals. And so it was 1,000 doors by age 40. And I hit that goal actually I think it was 2 months before I hit my 41st birthday. So it was pretty fun. And at that point I was like, hey, you know what? I figured something out here. I'd love to do this at scale, create value for more people. And so that's when I decided to launch Axie Partners and, start raising capital and teaching others how to do this, remove some of those barriers of entry and help people get in and be able to create passive income and, tax benefits and do what we do inside the commercial real estate space.
Yeah. So it's amazing. I love just taking the steps through someone's life on their way to a level of success that, normally isn't talked about. And so congratulations. It's so amazing.
Thank you. But with that being said, I feel like I'm just getting warmed up.
Yeah.
I hope that there's a book. I was with Ed Milet and Andy Frisella in St. Louis. We're at a steakhouse. It's about a year or two ago. And Ed Milet said something really powerful. He's like, he handed me a book. Sorry, Andy Frisella handed me a book called The Magic of Thinking Bigger. And then Ed Milet was talking about how his goal was that, when he was 30, he looked back at being 20. He's like, dude, when he was 20, he thought he was killing it. Looking back at 30, sorry, 30 looking back at 20, he's like, I was playing so small, right? When he's 50 looking back at 40, he's like, man, I was playing small. I could have been doing so much more. And I feel like that's where I'm at right now too. Like, it's you know, it's a pretty cool story. It's, there's some things to be proud of there, but what I'm really excited about is when I'm, 60 looking back at 50, and when I'm 90 looking back at 80, and hopefully I'm about 110. Goal is 120. We'll see though. Whole biohacking thing. We'll talk about that some other
it's
time.
a real thing. Yeah.
But just be able to look back and feel like, it was a full send, but on the important things, not just on business and not just on finances, right? Because ultimately that serves you with some seasonality, but eventually that's not really, like when you're on your deathbed looking back at your life, it's not gonna be like, well, dude, how much did you make? What was your net worth, right? What's your passive income number? It's not, that stuff, it wears off pretty quickly. So Definitely. It's more about what was the impact that you made in the world. And then for me, I think I mentioned this earlier, what I'm really excited about is, okay, what kind of impact can my children make in the world? And hopefully it's a very positive and it's a very big impact.
Yeah. Tell me about Larissa.
She's incredible. She's the thing that I'm most proud of is the family for sure. She's well, do you want me just in general?
Well, tell me a little bit how she's just impacted your life.
So she's been my rock, probably the best way of saying it. She's been the foundation. She's been my biggest cheerleader throughout it all. And I'm so grateful for her for having the patience, because, especially when you're, newlywed, at that time I was out traveling probably probably about 100 days per year on the road, traveling to these sales teams all across the country. That's hard, and to be away that long, especially when we had young children, diapers. And I share this, and I probably shouldn't publicly, but I think I changed a total of 3.5 diapers in my career ever. One was like a false alarm, but like 3. And that's, I know that sounds crazy, but she's such an amazing mom. She does an incredible job, like holding down the home front, which allows me, we really divide and conquer. Like, I know the home front's covered. The kids are going to be in great care. They're going to be well fed, and it's going to be, and then for me, I can go out and really focus on the business and go on building this, knowing that the home front is dialed in. And so you could call that old school, you could call that whatever. For us, that works beautifully. And so I'm so grateful for all the support that she puts in behind the scenes. And I would say that I think that her job, what she does, is at least as important as mine, what I do, if not more. And so I want to recognize her for that and I need to do a better job giving her more credit there, frankly, because it's such a not just a challenging job, but it's such an important job. And I think that a lot of times, moms, they don't get the credit that they really deserve, because, and I always joke like, hey, I want to have more time, not joke, but I want to have more time at home with the kids. But at the same time, like, dude, if I had that much time, like, that'd be hard for me too. So there's a balance there. But I think that when it comes to Larissa, I would just say she's the biggest blessing in my life. And to be able to have her, 20 years into this thing and actually love her more than I did when I first met her, like that right there is pretty special. And I think that that's something I'm really excited to see what that continues to evolve into down the road and how much deeper we can go together.
Yeah. You said she's your rock. When was a moment where you were struggling and she showed up as your rock?
I would say it's more of just a rock solid foundation that I know we can build something really, really big on, because she's going to be able to help support the load and to be able to have a very big vision that fits is more so than like, honestly, I didn't think of anything specific, like where I needed the emotional support or I needed, that kind of support. It's more just the level of trust. I'd say trust. The fact that we can be so open and authentic with each other and share our dreams, share, what's in our heart, and have that level of trust to be able to be that open with each other at this point, and really know that we are ride or die, like no matter what, like literally no matter what, it's us. And that type of confidence, I actually think, and we're getting really personal here, but I think it really empowers a man, or at least for me, to feel like I can go out and do and be very bold in my approach and go out and really pursue what inspires me because I've got that behind me.
Yeah, she helps you get to that level of that lifestyle of living so big and where you can dream like that, where you can actually achieve it. She's there to support.
That's right. And then one more thing I'd share is, and by the way, I've never talked about any of this stuff on podcasts, but is, that role where she's such a good nurturer. She's able to really create like softness in the home. Mm-hmm. And like, I hear the words "I love you" in our home at least a half dozen, probably on average 10 times a day, right? Even between the kids.
That's amazing.
Like, dude, I didn't create that. Maybe I helped a little bit or helped create some space for that, but that's all her. And so, and I can talk to kids about entrepreneurialism and finances and tax strategy and passive income and how to structure this, LLCs and entity formation. And we do,
yeah.
And it's fun, but it works because she's kind of the opposite of that. And she creates the femininity, I guess you could say, and the masculinity, or the softness and the rigor, the balance, the yin and the yang.
Well, what's insane about that is, I interviewed her parents. Her dad didn't ever hear the word "I love you" until Liz told him, and I was able to fill their relationship. So I know that Larissa helped break the chain of that in like a huge way. And so it's just kudos to her. And I think she for sure deserves to be acknowledged with the level of success that you guys have had. And again, I feel like I have a really cool insight on your guys' world and even more respect for it from where you guys both came from and what you've built. Just as we wrap up here a tiny bit, what's one message that you would want to scream from the mountaintops?
Jackson, you got some great questions, man. I've never had that one before. I've never had that question. Scream from the mountaintops. I was going to say beat yesterday. I've always lived off of that, like that. Always try to beat yesterday, do better. I think what comes to mind there is, oh man, I have so many different ideas. Like be true to yourself. Like that. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that's what really matters. That you feel like you live in congruence or authenticity to what's really important to you, right? So you can say you have no regrets in life. But right now, where I'm at in my career is really focusing on lead from the heart and really trying to not be in the spreadsheets and not so analytical and so calculated per se. Like that muscle has been worked out enough to where it's still going to be there. It's going to serve me, but to really lean into leading from the heart. Mm-hmm. And so in that vein, what I'd want to say is, and it's also very much applicable to parenting, which is it all comes down to love. Like at the end of the day, it's about unconditional love. As a dad, like that's what I learned more than anything else. Like I can try to be very rigorous and very, all these different ideas and systems and processes. But at the end of the day, it comes down to just love. Like, and the more you can pour into people with love, and ideally it's unconditional love, that's what really resonates. It's what really matters. It's what people need more of. And I think that that's what humanity as a whole could use more of. And so, lead with love. Yeah. Lead from the heart.
And I feel like from my experience with you, I could see your logical brain side of things, but I've got to witness probably more of you leading from your heart than most people get to see, because you're typically in your business meetings and all that. And so just again, kudos to to your growth that you've had? And it sounds like something happened pivotally in the last 2 years that, open up the heart side of you. And so congrats on that as well. With your eulogy, and if you sincerely were to die tomorrow, what's the legacy that you'd want to leave as Dave Allred?
That I was a superhero that my children needed them to be. That I was a loyal friend that was willing to give his shirt off his back. That I truly lived the golden rule and treated others how they'd want to be treated. That I created direct value for at least 10 million people. That I've helped at least 1,000 people create true financial freedom through passive income real estate. That my children are proud of our last name, and that our foundation has generational impact to help multiple generations in the future. But ultimately ideally that I led from the heart, and that I was able to create an impact in the world that I was able to create an impact in the world that my children will be proud of, that my family will be proud of, and that will outlive me. And, I was talking to a friend this morning, and I told him I was coming on your show, and he mentioned how, he wants to be able to plant trees that he's never going to be able to sit underneath. It's such a beautiful idea, like to be able to create these, this value, if you will. And even though I'm not going to be able to participate in that or to see it, I know it's going to help others and create value for other people in the future. That was a great way of saying it. I could rattle off the whole thing, but keep it a little bit. It's really long. It's multiple paragraphs long. Yeah. I think ultimately it's just to be, but it's also one thing I love in mine is to be a professional. He was a professional adventurer, right? I think that adventure for me is a big part of it. You are
insanely good at that. Yeah. I feel like that's a piece where I'm like, wow. I got to see the Dave business side, but slowly I've gotten to see a tiny bit more into all your adventure side that you've been doing lately.
Yeah, you got to work hard and play harder sometimes, right? Yeah. And it's actually been something I had to really work on is how to turn it on and turn it off. But I think that the more adventure we can have in life, it helps us to be, even in business, it helps to be more alive, to be able to understand calculated risk, how to really live life fully. And so I actually have it on I've been very intentional with trying to get more and more adventure in. I've been to 68 countries. Goal is 150. And then my kids are so passionate about it now too. So we have this tradition. Every time we go international, we get a fridge magnet. So our fridge is plastered with these. Now all my kids, my 20-year-old, we were at her apartment 2 days ago for her 20th birthday, and her fridge is covered in magnets, and they all have these world maps with the pins in it of everywhere they've been so far. And it's just fun seeing that passion, kind of trickle down to the kids as well. But yeah, mission statement, our eulogy is really just to have lived life full out, like full send, right? To not have left anything on the table. And at the end of the day, look back and be able to feel like I gave it my very, very best effort, and I left it all in the field. There's some quote about how, worst case scenario is end of life. You meet, the person you could have been, and you see what that potential was versus what your life ended up being. I just like to be able to close that gap as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, I think you're going to see a twin at the end. Well, this has been, a very special podcast for me. And I feel like our listeners got so much out of it, and I'm sure you're going to get some DMs with some questions about certain things. And thank you for showing up how you have always shown up. And this has been the special interview with Dave Allred. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Jackson.